Hi, Bill Yannick here, your Connect CEO with today's episode of the Daily Grind. And we have a very special guest who I'll introduce in a moment. But as we kick this off real quick, as we do at the top of every show, to remind you, this is our daily home at 1 Central, 2 Eastern, every day, same length, same time. We are talking COVID-19. This is the Daily Grind, and we have a wealth of resources and people to talk to within the Connect's membership. And we have one of the top, if not the top today. Our guest today is Ron Prager. He's VP and Chief Operating Officer of Brinco Mechanical Management Services, or Brinco as we know it, over 20-year member of Connects and Prism, and one of our stalwart members. Ron, welcome to the Daily Grind.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Great. So for the very few people out there who may not know what you do and what your company does, why don't you share a little bit about yourself and Brinco on the Daily Grind here?
Sure. Brinco is a national provider of HVAC and refrigeration service, maintenance, and replacements for companies that operate multiple sites. I'm a mechanical engineer as well as a licensed technician. My wife, Renee, is an attorney, and together we've owned and managed the company for the last 25 years. Prior to that, we operated as a local New York City-based HVAC contracting company.
Awesome. And you have all the bases covered there with the legal and the engineering. It should be all set there. So as we're confronting this COVID-19 pandemic, what are your thoughts or your advice dealing with indoor air quality?
So I defer to ASHRAE. ASHRAE, American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. It's the ultimate authority and primary source for all things HVAC. ASHRAE is a nonprofit organization dedicated to improving and educating the heating, ventilating, and air conditioning refrigeration industries. They actually perform base research and write papers and recommended standards. Those standards become adopted within almost every mechanical code around the globe to one degree or another. So New York City may have its own mechanical code, but its reference standard is some ASHRAE standard. And we're providing a link here to 50 free resources that ASHRAE has put up regarding indoor air quality during the COVID-19 pandemic. In broad strokes, ASHRAE makes 5 recommendations for control of indoor air quality where pathogens are involved. Okay. The first is to dilute contaminants by increasing ventilation rates. Basically, you introduce additional outside air, you exhaust additional outside air, you're going to dilute whatever contaminants are within your space. They also make a recommendation to increase air filter efficiency. Obviously, if you can strain whatever the pathogen is out of the air, you're going to give yourself a healthier environment. They're also recommending, and again, there are lots of papers on this that people need to look at on their own, treating the air or the space, or both, with ultraviolet light. We know ultraviolet light will kill pathogens, it will kill viruses. I don't know how much research has been done with ultraviolet light and COVID-19. My understanding is that they're pretty sure that it will kill COVID-19 as well. Something else that I just learned the other day, actually by watching The Grind and your interview with Dr. Stephanie Taylor, was maintaining relative humidity in the space between 40% and 60% affects, number one, the way the virus is transmitted, in that the higher the humidity, the longer the virus stays as a droplet and it falls to the floor rather than being aerosolized. It also affects the way that people are affected by the virus, which I found very interesting. I would strongly recommend that people watch that episode of The Grind. Lastly, ASHRAE recommends appropriate or proper maintenance and proper operation of HVAC systems, including the cleaning that's required of coil surfaces and of all surfaces that the air runs over.
Awesome. And we do have, as Ron mentioned, a link to those ASHRAE resources at connectsfm.com, and what a valuable group and service that ASHRAE does and provides, certainly with indoor air quality. And in thinking about ASHRAE's indoor air quality recommendations, Ron, what are your thoughts or recommendations to connects members, both on a multi-site and supply, but as we move through this pandemic and even post-COVID-19?
So we need to look at different possible measures in light of what makes sense for particular sites based on what we're trying to accomplish strategically, both during and after the pandemic. We'll also need to look at the cost and practicality of implementation versus real benefits. So what measures make sense for closed sites versus those that have remained open? What measures actually have or may potentially have an effect on improving the indoor air quality and reducing the spread of the virus versus what steps are we taking to influence perception of both employees and guests visiting those sites? And that perception is real here. We also need to look at measures that are required by laws and codes, both existing and yet to be determined as a result of the pandemic. I'll give you an example. So we had an outbreak a few years ago of Legionnaire's disease in New York City. We are now required, if you're operating a cooling tower within the city of New York, you're now required to have the water in that tower tested every 2 days, 3 times a week minimum.
Oh, wow.
And actually, even with these measures that have been put in place with respect to COVID-19, they loosened that up a little bit, but you're still required to test those towers weekly. We're actually making arrangements with building managers to get water treatment companies into buildings at a minimum on a weekly basis, because that code, that law has not been relaxed completely. So we don't know what's coming down with respect to codes, rules, and that will all be locally based or regionally based. There may be requirements that say you must prove that you're ventilating your space appropriately before you can open that space, or you may have to prove that you cleaned your coils. We have no idea where this is going. Last item here is we need to look at limiting liability. I'm sure you as an attorney are very familiar with this. Yeah. If you do everything that would be expected of you, the gross negligence is not involved. If you do not obey the codes, if you don't do the minimum of what would be anticipated by a responsible party having superior knowledge, because facility managers are expected to have superior knowledge. Well, if you don't do those things and there is an incident, you're going to be held to a very, very strict standard, and it's dangerous. It's dangerous financially. It's dangerous from a standpoint of a criminal situation. So we need to make sure that we're limiting our liability, that we're doing what's required by code, and that we are going to be giving the perception or doing everything possible that makes people feel comfortable in our sites. So if I look at ASHRAE's recommendations, what makes sense, or what I believe makes sense, and this is strictly my opinion, increasing ventilation where possible, absolutely. And it makes sense. It's gestalt. You think about it, if you dilute the density or the viral load that people are walking into, you're going to help or reduce the transfer. And there's something else here that most people don't realize. So every mechanical code requires that the operator of a space run their ventilation equipment, i.e. your rooftop units, whatever you're using to bring outside air into that space, that system has to be operated continuously whenever the space is occupied. The problem is most retail stores in this country do not operate the systems continuously. If you have a air conditioning system, a central air conditioning system at home, you look at the thermostat, you have a switch that says fan on or fan auto. Well, we're talking about running it in fan on. The fan runs continuously. Most people, most retailers operate it in the fan auto position, where the fan only comes on a call for heating or cooling. And there are a lot of reasons for this. One is savings in energy. Another is people complain about cold drafts in winter if you run the fans continuously. You also may increase humidity too much if you run the fans continuously during the summer. But Right now, I strongly recommend every retailer put their fans in the on position. It's a violation of code not to do so. Those who are using demand-controlled ventilation is a situation where you're measuring the carbon dioxide levels from people breathing in the space and opening your outside air dampers based upon that. ASHRAE is recommending that that be turned off, basically, and that you open up your outside air dampers to whatever degree possible without affecting temperatures adversely in the space. So I'm all for increasing ventilation, and those are some of the ideas as to what you can do immediately at relatively little cost. Increasing filter efficiency. So in my mind, we're trying to strain peas with a basketball net here. I don't necessarily know if the cost of increasing filter efficiency is worth the doing. Certainly, should we be using a pleated filter, a MERV 7 pleated filter? Yeah. I'm hearing people say that we should be increasing to MERV 17. Well, look, I've had some involvement in operating rooms and clean rooms in the past. Bottom line, if you want to strain out viruses, you're looking at bag filters that are 12 inches deep to 18 inches deep. You're looking at box filters the same size. The typical equipment used to service a retail store or a restaurant has a 2-inch filter rack in it. I don't know that the bang is worth the buck here. Ultraviolet germicidal radiation. Okay, it works. It works in the space, it works in the air. I guess the first question is, do we really believe that we're circulating air that contains the virus? If so, UV lighting inside the air conditioning system makes sense. Germicidal radiation, UV germicidal radiation inside the space also makes sense, but you can't run it with people in the space. So this is something, it's a subject that's beyond me. I will tell you that as an experiment, we're putting UV lighting into the 7 rooftop units on our corporate offices. And we want to see if it keeps the coils cleaner, what the effect is, how long the lamps last. They're supposed to last around 2 years. So if you have the money for it, if you're going for the ultimate in perception, why not put them in? You're probably looking at around $2,000 a unit to do it. Maintaining 40% to 60% relative humidity. And again, I just learned this week. Most stores and most spaces, except those in extremely arid climates in this country, are actually maintained at 40 to 60% relative humidity levels. Adding humidification to HVAC systems can be done. It's expensive. It's expensive to maintain. There are downsides in terms of leaks, and if you over-humidify, you can introduce mold growth. But certainly in areas where you've got arid climates, Las Vegas, Colorado, perhaps Utah, any place where you've got extremely dry conditions based upon what Dr. Taylor said the other day, I'm all for adding humidification, and it may very well become something that's required. And now we get to my favorite subject, proper maintenance. So most retailers, most people operating stores or multi-site facilities have put a hold on all preventive maintenance at this point, which means if we're looking at things coming back online sometime in June or early July, some of those sites are going to have gone without maintenance for 6 months, at least 3 months. This is a mistake. I understand the need to conserve funds. However, we're going to end up with a lot of equipment that's in very bad condition. We're going to end up with condensate leaks, stained ceiling tiles, dirty water leaking into stores. This is really not a good visual where you're trying to convince guests coming into your spaces that you're doing everything to protect them. Also, I think that we may see a shortage of air filters. Some of the air filter companies that I know of are now manufacturing masks, PPE masks. So, and when I say people, contractors are not necessarily going to have the cash that they need to bring all of their technicians back simultaneously, or to purchase all the materials they need to perform maintenance. You also may be required or may want to clean your indoor coils as part of this maintenance when we come back online. And there's not going to be enough contractor ability to perform what's necessary in the time period that we're going to be giving ourselves here. I really think somehow we need to work with landlords. We need to work with the operators of the spaces to get technicians in 30 days, 45 days prior to reopening these stores. Look, people haven't seen some of these spaces in 60 days. You may find the ceiling laying on the floor because your air conditioner's been leaking all that time.
Well, it's so much to unpack, and Ron, so much great information for our members. And I'm certainly heartened to know that even someone like you is watching the daily grind. That's great to hear. But and the other good news situation is Ron gave us so much there. We post all of these daily grind episodes at connectsfm.com in our coronavirus tools and resources center. So you can go out and listen to that again and pick apart all that he said. And one other thing that rang true, that a little advertisement for our associations, the government entities, regulatory bodies are going to be stepping into this issue in a big way and impact how we all do business. And it's going to be up to the standard setting organizations with input by subject matter experts like Ron and like our members of Connects to make sure that the types of things Ron's talking about, the very technical considerations and even the more reasonable things of what makes sense, because we know sometimes out of the standard setting bodies, there are unreasonable requirements put upon business. And at the end of this, we all need to get back to business and get back to work. And Ron, thank you so much. And another note, thank you for all that Brinco and that you and Renee have done for Prism and Connects over 2 decades. And I'm heartened to have members like you all helping us get out of this. So one last tough question on this, but personally, how are you all dealing with this? You're in the Northeast and certainly in the middle of the storm here. How are you all getting on?
Yeah, we're actually a suburb of New York City, so we're doing well. All of our employees are operating remotely. They're actually having daily departmental meetings, and we're seeing notes from those meetings. Very early in the game, to Renee's credit, we went out and bought gift cards from one of the warehouse stores, gave them out to the employees and said, go out there and buy as much non-perishable food as possible, stock it away in case somebody gets sick, in case there are shortages. We did that probably about 6 weeks ago. And we're fully operational, operating from home. We check up on everybody. We're doing well. All things considered, obviously, the flow of work is significantly reduced, although we do have some clients who are fully operational and some who are partially operational. But psychologically, what we've found is that people need to talk to each other. People need to talk to their coworkers on a daily basis, just to get some comfort level. For years, people wanted to work from home. Now I keep finding people going into the office, Yeah,
isn't that amazing? We've had a similar dynamic on my small team compared to yours, but yeah, there's going to be so much water cooler bonding that happens when people can actually find the water cooler.
Yeah, exactly. After it's wiped down with Clorox.
There we go. Yeah, all that being said. So Ron, thank you so much for joining us today. And so that's our great episode of the Daily Grind. As I mentioned, we're here every day, 1 Central, 2 Eastern, same link, same time. This episode, while we'll broadcast it live, we'll also have it on our website. You can go back and unpack, again, all the great stuff that Ron shared. Thank you and our audience out there for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Daily Grind.